Hello everyone, my name is Hassan Halawa. I'm from Egypt, and basically that explains my general fascination with anything that looks like a pyramid. I'm a PhD student at the Electrical and Computer Engineering department at UBC, as FA explained. I'll be talking to you today about my project Artemis, which is at the core of my PhD dissertation. I'm a member of the Network Systems Lab under the supervision of Professor Matei Rapanu. We study the technologies behind the computing infrastructure of the future, basically how to make large-scale computations run faster on a smaller number of machines and using much less energy than before. My own research tackles security in the cyberspace, a topic which draws insights from many of the areas that we explore in our lab. Basically, I focus on the security of online services such as online social networks, email services, as well as mobile application stores. Nowadays, the set of services that we use is constantly expanding. We are both empowered professionally and personally by those services that we use. Given that these services that we rely on every day are increasing, our digital identities and our online identities are fast becoming invaluable. The problem is that nowadays we are seeing a large number of sophisticated cyber attacks which operate at scale and attempt to take advantage of individual mistakes made by users. So a small incorrect decision will lead to disastrous consequences. One such example was, as FA mentioned, emails received and then leaking passwords, and this is basically known as a phishing attack. We've seen the political fallout during the 2016 US presidential elections and the controversy surrounding the leaked emails after the Democratic Party was targeted by a phishing attack. That's on the political side of things. How about on the personal level? I'm sure you've all received an email which kind of looks like this. The email claims to be from a legitimate entity, say your trusted bank. However, it includes a link to a fraudulent website controlled by an attacker. That website looks exactly like the bank's page. However, it collects the login information and just sends them to the attacker. Contemporary defenses are generally based on detecting such attacks, so detecting the page itself, and not on improving the ability of users to make correct decisions. This leads to a never-ending cycle between attackers and defenders, a cycle where the defenders are always struggling to maintain the upper hand. Instead, I believe that a better approach embraces education as a key defense element. Educating users not only arms them with the skills and tools necessary to avoid today's threats, but also to be able to handle any new attack that might evolve in the future. However, this advice basically protects those users who are at risk from the direct cost of the attacks, but burdens the majority of the user population with increased indirect costs in the form of effort. The core of my PhD dissertation is to develop techniques to identify vulnerable members of the user population and then uncover ways to basically guide those users, such as to avoid them falling to such attacks and to decrease their susceptibility to such attacks in the future. My approach actually targets the individual user to establish a net positive defense element, instead of just basically providing that information and increasing the burden on the rest of the population. So for example, educational material can be customized and sent out only to those that stand to benefit the most from them. So how do we identify those vulnerable members of the user population? Over the course of everyday use, large volumes of user data are being collected by online service providers. This data holds user behavioral patterns, which can be extracted and then analyzed in order to identify vulnerable users. Given the sheer volume of data, however, computers can be programmed to go through it, to uncover those patterns, to look through the data, and basically try to learn from it, to identify the vulnerable users. That is basically the application of machine learning, which allows computers to learn from that data and then carry out the identification of users. In addition to providing targeted educational materials to those users that stand to benefit the most from it, defenders can actually shield known vulnerable users from existing attacks instead of just trying to divert their resources to a large population. Another approach is for by basically observing who is interacting with the vulnerable users, the defenders can actually make informed decisions about ongoing attacks. Attackers could be unmasked through their pronounced interactions with the vulnerable population. This would aid the identification and quick recovery in case of attacks. My PhD has the potential of benefiting the public along several directions. First, by paving the way for more efficient and effective defenses, which would decrease the success rate for cyber attacks and their overall economic costs to users, companies, and the public at large. More importantly, the insights gained by investigating the underlying risk factors when it comes to the vulnerable population can actually help inform public policy with regards to cybersecurity and privacy procedures and guide user education as well as the advice offered to the users of the internet at large. To recap, I believe that a key element is focusing on identifying and focusing defensive resources on vulnerable users as part of a defense strategy for online services. By identifying those users, we can basically protect them and guide them through either education or other means. Thank you all very much for your attention. That concludes my presentation for today. My contact information as well as up-to-date information about my project are available through my website. Thank you all for your attention and enjoy the break.